Hello and welcome to the Afinado podcast. I'm your host, Nuria, and with me is trailblazing lawyer, human rights activist, politician, and author, Honorable Martha Karua. Martha, please welcome to the show.
Asante sana.
So today we're going to be talking about your book titled Against the Tide, My Journey on a Less Trodden Path. And we'll also touch on the books that shaped your life and, of course, moments that stood out in the book. You began school at 6 years old, and around this time, Kenya was achieving its independence. Can you tell us a bit about the euphoria that surrounded that?
I think the only thing I remember as a child is my mother and father dancing. You know, that was strange. It's not something they do every day. The excitement, hearing neighbors outside. And when they started seeing signals from the mountain, people are coming out of their houses. We also came out of our house. It's pitch dark, but you can hear the voices in the next farm and the next, and voices in the shopping center. There's a lot of excitement, pitch dark, and therefore you are seeing the signals clearly. I don't know whether there was signal or fireworks. Whatever it was, we saw light on the mountain.
Yeah.
And then the radio is also blaring. And my father is announcing, and the radio is singing, where the, which means independence. So I remember those moments, not because I captured the significance, but I knew something was happening, and, you can pick.
Yeah.
Children can pick the vibes.
Excitement.
You can feel there's something great happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A huge change taking
And thereafter, my mom showing us during the day the flag fluttering on top of the mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we knew it's something you have to keep.
Because you grew up, your home was 3 kilometers.
About 3 kilometers from the Mount Kenya forest. Yes. Mm-hmm. And those days you could see the mountain clearly.
So you started schooling, and this is where you also started discovering a love for reading. So what do you remember about the books you were reading at that time, the availability of books, and how also the learning culture was at that time?
I remember we started schooling in vernacular, Kikuyu. We are writing on the soil with our pointing finger, okay? There are no slates or books. Eventually they bring the slates, and those who do not know what a slate is a tiny blackboard, which now you can write with a chalk or a chalk-like pen. And then in standard 3, they start teaching us in English. And nobody has introduced English to you before. They are calling it English medium to discourage you from talking Kikuyu and to force you to talk the English you do not know. They introduce what we used to call monitor. Only now I'm grown up, I know it was a monitor. So a wooden, round, black thing, which keeps on getting past. If you notice talking Kikuyu, you are given monitor. And the last person to have it will be punished. An unfair system, because all the others have spoken Kikuyu, you're not the only one. So we would stop talking, but we would still talk. Sometimes we are borrowing a rubber from the next one, because by now we are writing in exercise books in pencil. So you just be quickly whispering, "Baraba, give me a rubber." And the next thing you know, the monitor is on you. Yeah, so we were taught at that stage now, when we are learning the English medium, is where now my father, a teacher, buys me this storybook, Jumping Rabbit, because he wants me and him to read in the evening. He's it's like prepping me ahead of what is happening in school so that I can get it quickly. Both my parents, my mother had been a teacher before when I was younger and dropped off. When I came, I'm the second one.
Mm-hmm.
After getting 2 children, she left teaching to become a full-time mother and managing the farm and whatever small business they had. When I talk of the farm, it's a small farm, small scale, not a ranch.
A subsistence.
Yeah, farm. And in my place, the farms are really small. Ours was 6 acres. So they are helping me and my sister to learn English. And even before I could read properly, because the book was more illustration than writing, I had memorized the story because we were reading with my dad, and I would In the evening, give him the whole story, be congratulated. That's all that I needed to keep doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then my teacher now, because I became ahead of the other people in class in grasping the language, my teacher, to congratulate me for being number one in English, bought me a book, one of the books that we were using in class, Brighter Grammar.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to love now working with those books. So they actually introduced the love for reading.
And then from now primary school, you moved to high school, which of course has its own very interesting stories. And I really want people to like read those stories, but you can just share a bit about your high school experience.
Okay, high school was nice in the sense that you are now in your teenage.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had come from a boarding school, you are able to interact easily, make friends. You're able to learn on your own. And you also are having a mind of your own as you grow.
Yeah.
So I got into trouble. One of the things is that if it's prep time and you're caught talking, it's called noise making.
Yeah, yeah.
So the prefect will be writing down noisemakers and the teachers will punish you for it. Only sometimes they'll give you disproportionate punishment, which I refused. And then you get expelled.
Yeah.
Yeah. But my father was very supportive. Like when I refused to be caned on the backside, when he came to school and they asked me to get out of the office as he talked with the teacher, he was there telling the teacher that he's a teacher like him. I could hear from outside. And that the rules prohibit girls from being caned on their behind.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know about the rules, but I noticed that girls were beaten on the hands, the boys on the bottoms. So I knew the bottoms are a no-go zone for girls.
Mm-hmm.
Now that I'm a grown-up, I know it's indecent. Then I hear my father talking about the code. I don't know what the code is, but I know it's against the rules. And out of it, my father withdraws us from the school when the teacher becomes undermanned. And this was an acting headmaster. Mm-hmm. Our headmaster, Mr. Gomez, had gone on leave in Goa. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so little things like that. Yeah. But when he came back, he looked for my father 3 months later and asked why one of his best students had been withdrawn from the school. And they talked and we returned to the school.
And it's very interesting also because I think I could relate to your boarding school experience, having also gone to a Kenyan boarding school, although our systems were different. But I do remember like preps time, getting in trouble for talking during preps.
Yeah.
You know, there are teachers who would teach us on duty and if they catch you speaking, it becomes an issue. So that was like really interesting to read and connect with in the book.
But imagine getting into trouble to the extent of leaving a school because you made noise in class, you talked.
Yeah.
You know?
It was a bit extreme.
Teachers also must treat students or pupils the way children are treated at home.
Yeah.
You can't expel your child from home. So unless if it's something very drastic, they're supposed to mold you. Now I know that.
Yeah. And there have been calls of bringing back corporal punishment, which, you know, I don't know what are your thoughts on that. For me, I feel it's just too...
It doesn't help.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we should all have been passing with flying colors for all the beating.
So then you moved to your A-levels, which was a Nairobi girls' school. Yeah. And you also had very interesting experiences, but you also enjoyed learning because you found the teachers there way more...
Very warm, camaraderie. There were young ladies who had just come from the university. We are A-levels waiting to join university. We really had a good time at Nairobi Girls, and the culture with the teachers and students totally different.
You also picked your A-level subjects because you'd already decided very early that you wanted to be a judge. At the time when you decided you were calling it judge.
Judge, it's just a local magistrate. I'd seen the local magistrate, so I was interested in being like that magistrate. Mm-hmm. But locally, they'll call them jaji. Mm-hmm. No, there's no distinction.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and I ended up becoming that magistrate for 6 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is in the book, and it was very early at 24 years.
Yeah.
You picked history, English literature, and divinity, and you also did a subsidiary in current affairs. From a different interview, you talked about one of the books you were doing at that time, and how you had a very interesting experience using some of the lingo from the book.
Yeah, that was in Form 4 when I was sent home from school and I had to study at
this was
home.
before A-levels.
Yes, and I was doing my O-level exams from home. And they lasted 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Luckily, my dad, a teacher, was also doing O-level at that time to improve his grade as a teacher.
Yeah.
And to get promotion. So he used to drive me to a central place called Kutus. He would go to his center, which was in Kirogoya, the county headquarters. That time it was the district headquarters. And I would go down to Karoti, which was my school. I would take public means. In the evening, he would wait for me again at the central place. So when I went to school the first day and the day of the rehearsal, those days you'd have the rehearsal a day before the exam begins, where everybody sits at their desk, and therefore on exam day there is no fumbling, you go straight to your desk. So I arrive at school early that morning, and I find they are in assembly, and I was doing literature, Dada by Nkem Nwanko, and there was this greeting, kli kli kli, and everybody answers yee. So I went and greeted people at the assembly. Because we were doing it for A-levels and we'd done it for 2 years, the whole school knew the greeting. So I interrupted the assembly with the greeting, and the headmistress just said that my index number is not in the school, it's in the next compound.
Oh, wow.
There was a church there. So I was
they put your desk
in the
there.
Church so that I'm out of the school.
So you don't disrupt them with click.
I told her I knew where it is. I was just greeting a few people I knew. So I shook a few hands and left.
And what books were you reading? What books made an impact on you during this time?
All those books, because you read and you sort of live the life of those people.
Yeah.
You immerse yourself and you imagine like you're in that place. All through the time I've read literature books, I read and I immerse myself and sort of live that life. Whether it is, some are not even literature books, it's pure novels. I read the Taipan of the Noble House, and I could picture the life in Japan, of the life of an explorer, Muzungu, who goes to Japan. You read Anna Karenina, and I almost imagine that I know Russia. But I've never been there. I know them through that book, Anna Karenina. Literature opens different world. Whether, whatever book you read, like even before I went to Nigeria, I felt like I knew it. You feel like you know Lagos, but you know it from the novel. And when you go, you find, yes.
It's like in the book.
It's very much like.
Yes.
Yeah.
You are also getting, I think, political awareness of what's happening in the politics around you. I think that was always part of it, because you talked about growing up and listening to Parliament Today, the radio program. But also when you're in high school was when there was a J.M. Kariuki assassination.
Actually, it was the interface between Form 4 and joining A-levels 5. Because J.M. got killed early that year. And results would come around March and people would go to Form 5 in May. Not like now when they come out the same month.
Yeah.
So J.M. was murdered when we were waiting for our O-levels to come out. And I remember I was teaching as an untrained teacher in one of the schools. And I remember feeling the fear, you know. Actually, from the radio talk, from people talking in whispers, you almost feel fear. Like you are also in danger. It's like everybody was in danger.
Yeah.
Fear of the unknown. And when we came to A-levels, we were discussing it. It's in the papers, because A-levels now, they give you papers to read. Because those of us doing current affairs needed to be current.
Yeah.
So my political awareness is getting shaped.
Yes.
And now gets properly shaped at the university.
And this is where you begin being involved in political activism.
Yes, and hearing all about Karl Marx, because you are not reading much of that. It's for the people in doing arts.
Yeah.
But you interact, you get to know about socialism, about capitalism, all those things.
Yeah.
And then you mirror what you have learned with what is happening in the country about the injustices. And you also learn the art of demonstrations, protests, protesting about the ills, like the protest we participated in against the policy of shoot to kill. And you also get into politics of the campus that food is not good. There's a strike about food. There's a strike about this and that, you know, that kind of thing.
And you are also, I think at this time, you are also now familiar with local writers like Michere Mugo and Ngugi wa Thiong'o.
They are lecturers at the university during my time. And I remember my friend Wamboi Kaire telling me there's this very interesting and smart lady who is teaching them, and they're having a public lecture. So we go, because the public lecture is a time when everybody who wishes can go. So you go listen to them. You listen to people like Ngugi wa Thiong'o, creating awareness that we should be ourselves, not ape other people, not take names whose meaning we even don't know. I still remember him saying that you may find a parent calling a child winter bottom. What would that, without knowing what they mean. Yeah. And I remember him also abandoning his name, James. Then it just becomes Ngugi wa Thiong'o. So your mind is being shaped and you're becoming more and more aware. Yeah.
And this was around the time he also did the play. Was this the time he did that play?
Yeah. That's the same time he later will do the Gahikadeda. Yeah. I'll marry when I want. Yeah. If it is in Kishugo, we would say Gahikadeda.
Because that's like pronunciation.
Yeah.
I won't even try to pronounce it. So now I'd like to move to moments that really stood out in the book. There are very many moments, but I'm going to pick a few so that I don't spoil for people who are going to be reading.
Maybe before you go to the book, we need to mention one more lecturer, not just Michere and Ngugi. Okot Bitek, a Ugandan.
Wait, he was a lecturer
was lecturing at the university. And there is Song of Lawino and Song of Ochol. And we had done those at A-levels.
Yes. And then you're meeting him at university.
Yes. And, we are also going to public lectures by people like him who really were outspoken and, radical thinkers.
Yes.
Radical of the time, And it really was interesting. And at the university, our lecturers are not like master-servant relationship.
Yes.
They'll even joke with students. They'll explain. You can meet a lecturer and engage them and they'll talk to you. It was a very interesting time. We had the best of them. And there were many. They're the Willy Mutunga lecturing us. Wow. Professor Kibuda Kibwana, who was a junior lecturer at that time, was later privileged to work with these lecturers, as you can see. Earlier on with Willy Mutunga in the Law Society.
Yeah.
With Professor Kibuda Kibwana in politics, and we are still working together. So it's an interesting world.
I do remember, I think it was my mom or one of her friends talking about how when the 1982 coup happened, they actually came for literature lecturers and philosophy.
Oh, yeah, because they were thinking those are the ones radicalizing. And it's not really radicalizing. It's just openly talking things and helping students to develop their critical analysis of the world around them.
Which is necessary.
That is now considered an aberration. Just like I'm seeing on Twitter today, that a young man wearing a T-shirt written "Must Go 27" was arrested in town yesterday. The more things change, the more they remain the same. Yeah. Those days it was lecturers being hounded. Now it is civilians.
I'd like to know what inspired you. I know you've heard about Chimamanda Adichie's Danger of a Single Story. And I think for the longest time, especially in politics and media, there's a way people shape an opinion about a personality or leaders. And there's been, like you've talked about in the book, people referring to you as the Iron Lady. But what do you feel the book is going to assert or demolish in terms of what
May I say that my purpose is not to answer, is to tell my story. And I've avoided reading my colleagues' books until this one was out. Why? I don't want to answer anyone.
Yeah.
I want to tell my story from my perspective.
And in your own
unaffected by what anybody else may say against me.
Yeah.
I even know books where something is written about me. I have not read them. I'll read them now.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to be influenced by anybody's view of me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sharing my story.
Yeah.
Because when people call you to talk, they are asking for your experience in life, your perspective
Mm-hmm.
of certain things. When I'm called to talk either to women, to youth, or to just a general population or to a professional body, it's because they think there's something I can share with them.
Mm-hmm.
So this way, you are sharing for posterity
Yeah.
your experience. And it doesn't mean that your experience is everything that can be replicated or should. By sharing, people are free to choose what to take or not to take.
Mm-hmm.
Your story may reveal certain missteps. It may help people to avoid those missteps. So it's just sharing, and we learn as human beings through interaction and instruction. So it's a part of sharing. We've all grown through sharing with others. Even the stories Mwanjogu shared with me, my grandmother. What I saw my neighbors and others do around me. Teacher Margaret, my neighbor.
Yeah.
I learned something. So I'm sharing, but a book helps you to share with a wider audience. Yes. Yeah, so it's just sharing my story.
And I also found it very interesting how, as much as you're also sharing, it kind of also records a time and place that I can say someone like my niece, who is a Gen Z, may not have ever experienced or heard about. So they don't really look at, like, say, my mom, who's now her grandmother. She won't look and realize, oh my gosh, you were a teenager.
No, they think we were born old.
Yeah.
So it's good to let them know
I think they'll read it
that
and be like, you're a teenager.
We once went to school. We did this, did that.
And you went through your challenges.
Yeah.
And there's something to learn from that. Yeah. So I think it's very beautiful that, you're sharing this in your book.
So I'm sharing what Mwanjogu shared with me orally.
Yes.
I have a better platform to share in written form. So I'll share with many generations and for a longer period.
Yeah, I love that. There was something I thought was very interesting in terms of growing up just before independence, which was, I think, the emergency period.
Yeah.
And this was when a state of emergency was declared because of the Mau Mau freedom fighters. There was this part in the book where you described the terror/admiration that people in your village and probably wider area around Mount Kenya felt for the Mau Mau. So there was like, we are scared of them because they could grab you and take you to the forest and force you to join. Yeah. But also we silently support them.
Yeah.
And then you're also scared of being called a collaborator. There's a lot.
Yeah, that now aspect I am sharing not from my own memory, but from what I grew up with.
Yeah.
Because at that time, I was too young to grasp what is happening. But now from, the stories my father, my grandmother, those around me, and what I know now from all that is that it was a bittersweet relationship. That, like, people like my father, who was a teacher, or those working in the hospitals, could be viewed by the Mau Mau as collaborators because of working for the enemy. So if they catch you, they'll force you to go to the forest. But at the same time, him and others are supporting because they want freedom for their country. So you will find that their families are leaving food for the Mau Mau, sometimes left in the farm for them to come and harvest for themselves, or left, it's already harvested but kept strategically for them to pick, and them not agreeing to tell the colonial masters anything. Even if the Mau Mau are passed there, nobody will agree to say they saw, except the collaborators. There was very strong support from what I learned of the Mau Mau, but they were much loved but much dreaded as well.
At the same time.
Yeah, because they also needed volunteers in the bush.
Yeah. And it was also a very, I think, traumatic time. Do you feel, as a community and also as Kenyans in general, that we've addressed that post-colonial trauma
I
directly?
think not really, because even the injustices have never been redressed. We addressed it and didn't address it. Yes, schools were open for everybody and we've developed, but we never kept the course for the things that we fought for. So we have not been able to celebrate our independence the way we should, because we replaced the colonial master, white colonial master, with our own black oppressor, like is happening now. We cannot talk of colonial. 60 years later, we are oppressing one another. Look at the Ruto regime, which has almost suspended the constitution. Look at what is happening: abductions, executions, arbitrary arrests. Look at the destruction of the health system, the education system, the services people should get, the deconstruction of a state that was serving the people to a predatory state that sucks the last drop of blood from the people, that overtaxes the people to the extent that they are rendered helpless and cannot even afford themselves, that destroys houses of people. We really have to liberate ourselves from the new colonial master, who is our own people, who have ganged up and become puppets of exploiters.
There were still some other areas I'd like to touch on. Of course, one of the most talked about was your walking out of a political event where the former President Moi was presiding. And I actually remember watching this.
Yeah.
And I think we were in university. I was a journalism student then. And we were just like, oh my God, she's so, and you had these boots because also we were young. So we were noticing your boots were like, and then she was walking and she had her boots and she just walked out and raised her fist. So
the DP salute.
And it was, for us, it was so epic. Yeah. But now I'm sitting across you and I just love to hear a nugget of how that whole...
Moi had denied me a chance to speak. He had let his local KANU chairman pour scorn on my party leader, former President Mwai Kibaki, to the extent of even saying that we are crazy to think Kenya can be governed from Othaya. I thought we needed to address this, and when he refused to give me a chance to speak, I decided I'll walk out on him, not on his people, that I will speak through actions. As a lawyer, I knew no law requires me to sit and listen to a president. But the law requires me from creating a disturbance that will spoil his meeting. But I can walk out and I can give him a DP salute just to show people that the law is greater than a president. And I did exactly that.
Yeah.
Because then, if I had sat meekly, how was I going to return to the same people to campaign for re-election in 2002? And this was mid-2001. We were going to show the people like there's no room for opposition. And that's what Moi regime was doing deliberately. The same playbook Ruto is using. Swallowing opposition by swallowing ODM and its leadership, except a few people who are separating themselves in the party. Showing like there's no room for dissenting voices, angrily shouting at everyone that why are you opposing me? You are not God. You will be opposed every day from sunrise to dawn. And we might also ask you the question, why are you destroying us? Why are you destroying Kenya? Why have you become Pepombaya? Because you have identified it yourself that there is a Pepombaya. The only thing you were unable to identify is that Pepombaya is you. You came in with total disaster. Look at the country now. Look at our youth. Look at everything. So we need to show precedents and to remind them, especially now that the Constitution gives sovereignty to the people. We own the republic, not them. We collectively. You are our mere employee. So listen to our voices. Don't ask why are you opposing. Find out why we are opposing.
Yes.
And shape up because you work for us.
Yeah.
So that's just what I was showing Moi, that the law is greater than you.
And this was, of course, around the time multi-partyism had already begun. But this was when there was a real push and NAC Kenya was coming into being.
NAC.
Before NAC.
No, NAC came later. We were now in DP.
Yeah.
The Rainbow Coalition came in 2002. But there was the move for the opposition to come together to remove Moi.
Yes.
Just like today we are saying progressive forces. And I really hope we learn from history. When we have a despot like Ruto, unless if people come together to get one major push that any rigging method cannot survive the flood of votes, that's the only way to remove despots. And I'm saying Ruto is an apprentice. He's taking training from Museveni on how to become a dictator. You know? We must not let Ruto graduate. We must thwart his graduation by coming together and booting him. Let him go back to Sugoi and leave Kenya to Kenyans. And those of us who want to be in top leadership, we must keep reminding ourselves it is our right to grow our brand and to compete. But Kenya is bigger than us. At some stage, we will have to have a formula. Come together and produce a single candidate. But for now, each one of us can grow their brand. Nobody should be, nobody is going to get it on a silver platter that people have said it is you. In what poll? Let us grow our brand, everybody their brand, but let's have friendly fire. Remembering Kenya is greater than any one of us. And whoever ends up getting chosen, the rest must stand and support to rid off Kenya, a despot in the making, and to stop Ruto graduating to a Museveni.
I'd also like to bring it back to 2007.
Yes.
So during the post-election period, you were the lead negotiator for
Kibaki
and
Musalia
Mudavadi was a lead negotiator for
ODM and Raila.
Yes. And it was also during this time that people labeled you as hardliners for being kind of at the forefront of this.
I think you have to know that in negotiations in a disputed election, where a president has already been sworn in, those on the president's side are the ones who must give to accommodate those in opposition. Therefore, whenever there is a stalemate, the people who are going to be blamed, of course, are the ones in government because you're being told you're not moving enough. But we have to remember that you have been appointed to negotiate by the head of government, who was President Kibaki. The mediators will not call out President Kibaki, so you become the fall guy. So you have to be labeled the hardliner. That's why I call diplomacy deception. They know very well that it is your boss telling you this is the end, but you are blamed as though it is you. We even were threatened with the denial of visas. And I was asking the Western diplomats whether the definition of heaven has changed to make the West heaven. Because my heaven is right here in Kenya. If heaven is in this world, then it's in my country. So you can't tell me I will not come to your wintry country. Who wants to live in such conditions? So we were telling them off because they were trying to bear pressure on the president through us, the negotiators.
And this was also the time certain leaders from the US, like Jendai Fraser, who was the Assistant Secretary, and Condoleezza Rice, Secretary of State, were also seeking audience with the president. And you described a very interesting exchange with Jendai Fraser because she came and her tone was not very diplomatic or respectful.
Even Condoleezza. And both of them, in the presence of the president, I had to tell them they're merely bearing messages from their president, which they should give in a respectful manner. Because we really allow some of these Western diplomats, not all of them, to disrespect us. We should never allow them to disrespect our institutions. The presidency is an institution. The presidency must respect itself and respect the people. In turn, those working under it must respect our institutions. We are not a colony of any of those nations, however much money they have. So we must stand up for the dignity of the people of Kenya. But standing for their dignity is not selling them short. Giving our minerals and our airports. Is maintaining the integrity of the republic on behalf of the people of Kenya. I stood up to those diplomats on that. And you can get that in the book.
I really love that part in the book.
Yes.
It was one of my favorite parts. I think we can also just now talk about what you'd like to see for the future of Kenya, I'm going to read just a short section here where you talked about our youth. You'd already finished writing this book before the protests that happened this year, led by the Gen Z youth. And I found it interesting that you had almost foreseen by speaking about it here. So I can read this small section. Our continent's population is largely composed of young people. Our youth suffer the brunt of deteriorating governance and high unemployment. Without positive change in governance, their future is not guaranteed. Corruption robs them of jobs and opportunities, confining them to poverty and desperation. Families, too, are deprived of health, education, and other basic amenities.
Really, I must say that the issue of the youth bulge in Africa is not new. Even when we sat to agree on the national accord after the disputed elections and post-election violence in 2007. One of the agendas before Kofi Annan, the pro-people agendas, agenda number 4, contained the issue of the youth and joblessness. If you think of 2007 and now it's 2024, you can see so many years have passed, almost 10. It's 2 years short of 10 or 3 years short of 10. And it means that the youth bulge has only become worse. Yet, as the leadership, we have never sufficiently addressed this. Addressing it is having an economic policy that fosters growth, that creates jobs and opportunities for the youth. Instead, we are condensing them. Look at the Ruto regime, what it is doing with its double taxation, triple, quadruple taxation. Businesses are closing, so jobs are condensing, not expanding. And we are not just talking of the conglomerates. SMEs have closed. And we have over 2 million SMEs in Kenya. If each one of those created only 3 jobs, those would be 6 million jobs. So when you have policies that cause your SMEs to close, that is not directed to support your biggest job creators, which are the SMEs. You are favoring the bigger companies. And even those you are not favoring, because the big companies, GlaxoSmith, many companies have closed. So you can see you are actually destroying the environment for business. And corruption, which is an official policy of the Ruto government. Official in quotes. They will not announce it, but we can see. It's chasing more, impoverishing Kenyans, increasing the burden of taxation, robbing us of the money that could provide services. This is not an atmosphere for the youth to have any hope. You can see their hopelessness. You can see the suicide rates. No hope for education, no hope for health, no hope for jobs, no hope for anything. We really have to join hands. This is not a Gen Z thing alone. We are their parents and their grandparents. We let them down on June 25. When they were attacked and executed, arbitrarily arrested, abducted, we should have come out in our thousands, in our millions, the way other countries are doing. We should have stood up for Kenya. Our country is calling us to stand up for it together and reshape it so that our youth can have a future. And that's why I'm still in the political arena. We cannot leave the country worse than we found it. We thought that the 2010 constitution had transformed. But the more things change, the more they remain the same. Let's come together and stop the graduation of a despot called Ruto.
And on that note, I think we can end the interview here. Thank you so much for making time for my little podcast.
Much appreciated. Nothing is little. Any conversation, even with a single Kenyan, is a conversation. I learn from you, you learn from me.
Thank you so much.
I'm very shy of saying happy holidays because I know there are many people with nothing to celebrate, not enough food on their plates, no shelter, some of them whose shelter was destroyed by the Ruto regime. A lot of them not knowing how they'll return their children to school in January. Others having sick ones, and the chief Shah will not help them. It is a time to reflect. I wish you God's blessings in this very difficult situation. But let's think of which way to help one another and how to stand up for our great country.